Welcome to Hayes Reviews, the Fabian Society. So remember, this book is the Milner-Fabian conspiracy, so we're expecting some kind of cooperation or some sort of account of how both Milner and the Fabians conspired to do something. What is it? To take over and destroy the world. So we learn a little bit about the Fabian Society, and there's not too much to go through here. It's just to refresh people's mind and to give people who haven't been through the Fabian Freeway, which is on the playlists tab of my YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey channels. If you haven't had a chance to go through all that yet, then we'll do a little sort of cursory introduction to them here. So the Fabian Society is a British socialist organization whose purpose is to advance the principles of social democracy and democratic socialism via gradualist and reformist effort in democracies. And this is they do this instead of having a sort of revolutionary overthrow, which tends to lead to lots of head chopping and that sort of thing. So they prefer instead to plan over the long term, take gradual steps, be very canny about how they go about doing something so that the change is not too drastic and doesn't arouse too much suspicion or attention or resistance. If you change things gradually, kind of like the classic metaphor of boiling the frog in the pot, you're more likely to get away with your plan over the long term than if you just try and force it all through in the short term and smack people over the head and get them to obey you, right? This is one of the founding crucially and critically, and linking to 2024 here in England, this is one of the founding organizations of the Labour Representation Committee back in 1900, and it has an important influence upon the Labour Party. The Fabian Society has had a powerful influence on British politics. I like that it's put has had in the past, but later on this article it does tell you that that influence is still ongoing today. Crucially as well, the Fabian Society also founded the London School of Economics. So anytime you see the London School of Economics, which I've talked about on various other videos, you got to remember that this is founded by the Fabian Society, the same kinds of people who were swimming in the circles of Alfred Milner and the Round Table Group. Today, the Society functions primarily as a think tank and is one of 20 socialist societies affiliated with the Labour Party. Now, why the Labour Party needs 20 socialist societies, I don't know. It seems a lot, doesn't it? It seems a little bit uneven to have 20 socialist societies. But it kind of tells you where their sympathies lie, where their thinking lies, where they're going to take things once they are in power. And, they are in power now for what it's worth, if you believe that the party in power actually makes a difference. But this term think tank is very important to know, because I think there's a very good case to be made that think tanks are really where the source of power lies. If you want to know who's making the decisions, who's calling the shots, who's doing the analysis, who's crunching the numbers, who's putting the data together to advise the politicians whose names we know and who are rolled out in front of the cameras and who are, voted into place, then you got to look at the think tanks, and you've got to be aware of these institutions and these groups and these foundations and these think tanks, right? But Fabian Society, as we're going to find out, very influential, long-standing think tank, British think tank with international reach. So the organizational history, it consists of people who came from the ethical and humanist movement, and they were ostensibly interested in workers' rights and improving workers' conditions in factories, and they pushed for things like minimum wage and better working hours. Interestingly, in the early days, there was a sexologist involved called Havelock Ellis, and I'm not sure what a sexologist does, but I highlighted it because I've just read Brave New World, and I talked to Melissa about it. And if you haven't read Brave New World, firstly, go and read it, because it's mind-blowing how accurately it describes 2024, even though it was written in 1932 or 33. But this stood out to me because a key means of control used by the ruling establishment in the book Brave New World is this encouraging not even encouraging, but this mandatory lifestyle of carefree, free love that starts at a very, very, very uncomfortably young age. So the children in the book are sexualized, and they are encouraged to engage in play that is erotic, and if they don't do that, they get disciplined, they get shunned, and this goes on through their lives up until they're adults, where the expectation is that anytime you want to engage in some sex, the other person has to oblige. It's like a handshake. It is like nodding, saying hello, please, and thank you. It's good manners. And it's bad manners to knock someone back or put them down. And if you want to be with just one person, then you are an absolute outcast freak of society, and people don't know what to do with you. That is all in Brave New World, as amazing as that might sound to anyone who isn't familiar with the book and hasn't read it, but it's in there. And so it reminded me, that was a link to me, this sexologist being involved in the early days of the Fabian socialist movement. I'd like to learn a little bit more about this guy, Havelock Ellis. He has got quite a fantastic beard, I'll give him that. But he was a eugenicist, surprise, surprise. So, we'll go back to the article and learn a bit more about Fabian society. It was named in honor of the Roman general Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, and he was nicknamed Cunctator, which means the delayer. This Roman general's Fabian strategy sought gradual victory against the superior army under the renowned General Hannibal through persistence, harassment, and wearing the enemy down by attrition. Persistence, harassment, and wearing the enemy down by attrition. I thought those three, persistence, harassment, and wearing the enemy down by attrition, those three strategies are very reminiscent of the Big C event, I would say, of what kicked off in 2020 and was going to last for 2 weeks, but ended up lasting for 2 years. There was a lot of persistence, harassment, and wearing down of people's patience, of people's good nature, of people's inclination to resist and ask questions and demand answers. So that was just an example of how these kinds of strategies are employed even in the modern era, right? So, but that's where the society gets its name from. There's an explanatory note here, which is quite revealing too, which says, and this was on the title page of the group's first pamphlet, it says, "For the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal, though many censured his delays. But when the time comes, you must strike hard, as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless." So you've got this image of kind of like a coiled viper or a coiled predator, ready to strike, ready to leap, ready to pounce. We get a lot of cats in our back garden now, and they are always chasing the squirrels and the birds out there. And you can see them moving so slowly and carefully through the grass. And then suddenly they just spring into action when they think the moment is right. Now, so far, the birds and the squirrels have been way too fast for all the dumb cats around here that are probably overweight and pampered and just too domesticated to be able to hunt properly in the wild anymore. But it's still nice to watch them try, So that's kind of the insight into the Fabian strategy. There's another good quote here, which is from the author John Perdue, which says, "The logo of the Fabian Society, which is a tortoise, represented the group's predilection for a slow, imperceptible transition to socialism, while its coat of arms, which was a wolf in sheep's clothing, represented its preferred methodology for achieving its goal." So the speed they're doing it is the tortoise-like imperceptible transition, but the methodology is by appearing to be innocent, appearing to be friendly, appearing to be harmless. That is very critical as well. So organizational growth. People involved in this society include George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, Annie Besant, the famous theosophist whose work has fed into the United Nations and is still very well regarded to this day. Bertrand Russell was involved there as well. We've read one of his books on the channel, as we've also read one of H.G. Wells' books on the channel too, right? Many Fabians participated in the formation of the Labour Representation Committee, and at that meeting, at the meeting that founded the Labour Representation Committee, the Fabian Society claimed 861 members. That's quite a huge contingent who would have wielded some influence if they were throwing their weight behind a given proposal or decision, right? Early Fabian views. Well, they advocated tenets of social justice. How about that? Is there any of that going on these days? You betcha. You bet your bottom dollar there is a lot of social justice, and it's been going on for a number of years now. This can all be traced back to the Fabian Society. They also were pretty well into eugenics. But whoever wrote this says, but that was common view for the time, so don't worry about that. That was just normal to be into eugenics at the time, so don't read too much into it. These wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending to be friendly and harmless and innocent. Don't read too much into the fact that they were very, very much into eugenics. It also tells us that Fabian socialists were in favor of reforming the foreign policy of the British Empire as a conduit for international reform, and were in favor of a capitalist welfare state modeled on the German model. So they're interested in an internationalist expansion of their values and their socialism. And that was made very clear in the Fabian Freeway book, and it is made very clear by other analyses of socialism, which is just communism. And in fact, the socialism is actually the transformational stage between capitalism and communism. So the three are very closely intertwined, and it's sort of like a Ouroboros cycle where capitalism gives way to socialism, gives way to communism, gives way to capitalism. And it just keeps going round and round like that, kind of like a revolution. You know, things revolve, but a revolution leads you back in the same place as where you started. So these systems are not necessarily competing ideologies with one better than the other. It's more like they are controlled dialectics used for the transformation of society towards I would argue, the Aldous Huxley Brave New World scientific technocratic dystopia. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, I think. In 1900, the Society produced Fabianism and the Empire, which is a book I hadn't heard of before, so I might look for that. It expressed support for Britain in the Boer War. So this links us back to Alfred Milner and his great achievements of sticking a lot of weaker people, or maybe not weaker people, right? Because they fought the British off in the First Boer War. So he was sticking his enemies who wanted to be free of the yoke of British imperialism. He stuck them all in concentration camps and got his awards. Well, he was being supported by the Fabian Society in this Fabianism and Empire book, or maybe it's a book, maybe it's a tract or a leaflet or a pamphlet or something. I'm not sure, it doesn't say. But the reasons that the Fabians supported Britain in the Boer War is because small nations were anachronisms in the age of empires. And again, this links perfectly to Aldous Huxley in Brave New World. And I'm sorry that I'm mentioning this so much, but I literally just talked about it for 2 hours with Melissa of Cutting Through the Matrix last night. In that, at the very end, the guy who reveals the plan and reveals the reasons why society is run the way it is, he says, we do not want to give anything old to people. We want them to always be chasing after the new thing. We don't want people to be attached to, let's say, a Bible, an ancient text. We don't want people to be attached to Shakespeare, an old, hundreds of year old poetic language that is beautiful and powerful and high art. No, we want people to be untethered from that, and we want them to constantly be chasing the new, shiny, exciting thing as they're pushed forward through the changes that we have planned for them. So that fits very perfectly with this description of Fabians thinking that a small nation is an anachronism, and we are in a new age now. We are in the age of empires, not the computer game, But we are in the age of empires, and these anachronisms, these old ways of doing things, they got to go. They got to go. And so because they have to go, we will support Lord Milner and his concentration camps. So that's a bit, is that it? Oh, I got a few more highlights down here. It's also another quite a huge article as well, but this is bringing it up to the 20th century. So this is going to tie in with the book. During the 20th century, the group was always influential in Labour Party circles. So remember earlier in this article where it said sort of has had, it said has had, doesn't it? They have had an influence. Well, they were always influential through the 20th century. And what makes you think they've stopped being influential? They haven't, of course. But they're more influential when it's a Labour government that's involved. So, for example, after the election of Labour Party government in 1997, Fabian Society was a forum for new Labour ideas. The most significant Fabian contribution to Labour's policy agenda in government was Ed Balls's 1992 discussion paper advocating Bank of England independence. Former BBC British editor Robert Peston, in his book Brown's Britain, calls this an essential tract and concludes that Balls deserves as much credit, probably more, than anyone else for the creation of the modern Bank of England. So remember that quote. When you are struggling to pay your bills, when you can't afford to drive your car into the clean air emissions zone, when there is no food because all the farmers have been bankrupted or they're out protesting because they're not allowed to build and secure wealth for their future generations anymore, please remember that Ed Balls is the guy you want to blame because it's the Bank of England and its policies that he is responsible for, which has led to this absolutely catastrophic economic shit show that we are finding ourselves in now. So I thought that was interesting. And it also ties us back into the Milner's free man status as bestowed upon him by the City of London, right? Now, I don't know if the Bank of England is situated in the City of London. I don't know exactly if the relationship between those two entities, but I would guess, I would imagine, I would expect, I would hazard that that's probably pretty close. And so we got a little bit here about contemporary Fabianism. So this is telling us about how the Fabians founded the London School of Economics with the money left to the society. And also it tells us a little bit about the Fabian window, which was designed by George Bernard Shaw. And we looked at that in some detail on the Fabian Freeway streams. Again, just this hilarious story that the window was stolen in 1978 and reappeared at Sotheby's in 2005. Every time I read that sentence, I just can't wrap my head around how you steal a window and how it magically reappears, and nobody was held accountable, and there was no explanation as to how or why that ever happened. I just don't get it. But anyway, it gave an excuse for Tony, war criminal, mass murderer, psychopathic, demon infested nutcase Blair to step in and probably receive a fat paycheck for restoring this window to its rightful place at the Shaw Library, at the London School of Economics in 2006. And then there's some other information about the numbers and the membership. And then, crucially, Fabianism outside the United Kingdom. So if you remember that the subtitle for this book is how an international elite is taking over and destroying Europe, America, and the world. This is telling us about the international reach of these ideas, as did Rose Martin and Fabian Freeway. But the major influence on the Labour Party and on the English-speaking socialist movement worldwide, this is the article on Wikipedia again, has meant that Fabianism became one of the main inspirations for international social democracy. And it has gone to all sorts of different places, such as Australia and Canada and New Zealand. In California, it's mentioned as well. So it's all over the place. Italy here. It's very much an international, worldwide effort to spread these ideas, to go out and influence and act like wolves in sheep's clothing, to roll out this slow transformation of society in a way that people don't perceive, because it's hard when you see somebody every day, you don't notice them change. But when you don't see them for 6 months and you meet up again, it's like, well, you can see that if they've put weight on, or if they've lost weight, or if they change their hairstyle, or whatever the difference is, right? The longer gap that you don't see somebody, the more obvious the change when you do see them. But if you see them every day, you don't notice a change. And it's the same kind of concept there. They're just slowly making gradual little changes each day, and it seems perfectly normal and organic. And then people can tell you with a straight face that, oh, there's no plan. It's just working out this way. It happens to be that these are the crises that we face, and this is the technology that we have, and this is the way that our systems work, and they could be better, but people are doing their best. There's no, and it's like this organic, coincidental, unplanned view of things, of history and of the present era. And I think in this channel, myself and other people, and I talked a little bit to Melissa about this, to us, people who can recognize patterns and who like to read books and dive deeper into things, you start to see that there is a plan, because they write the plans in books, and you can read the books and compare it to reality and see, oh yeah, what they said they were going to do, they did it. Right. Yeah. Interesting. But anyway, there's a little section here on critiques of the Fabians, and it mentions H.G. Wells and how he described the faults of the Fabian Society in a paper of the same name, The Faults of the Fabian, and he also satirized them in a novel called The New Machiavelli. And then these quotes were pretty good because the Fabian socialists, they were fans of communism, and they wanted to push socialism as a means to bringing communism in, right? But guess what the communists thought of them? Well, Lenin, he wrote that the Fabians were social chauvinists and undoubtedly the most consummate expression of opportunism and of liberal labor policy. I don't know where these quotes come from, so I don't know if they're real or not, but it's quite funny to see them here. Lenin also declared that Fabians were a gang of bourgeois rogues who would demoralize the workers and influence them in a counter-revolutionary spirit. And then Leon Trotsky also critiqued the Fabian Society as provincial, boring, and unnecessary, particularly to the working class. He wrote that their published works, quote, serve merely to explain to the Fabians themselves why Fabianism exists in the world. So those quotes were quite funny because of the links between socialism and communism, and then these communist OGs had such negative things to say about the Fabians themselves. But that's a little introduction to the Fabian Society.